I wanted to thank everyone for coming today and making the time to join us. My name is Ralph Hall. I'm an associate professor here in the School of Public and International Affairs at Virginia Tech, where I also am the associate director of the school. It is my pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Dr. Tiziano Distefano. Tiziano is a research fellow in the Department of Economics, Management at the University of Pisa in Italy. Before taking this position, he previously worked at the Politecnico di Torino, also in Italy. He received his PhD in Ecological Economics in 2015 from the IMT Institute of Advanced Studies of Lucca. During his PhD, he was a visiting research scholar at a number of institutions, including the Universidad Nacional de Colombia in Medellin, Colombia, at the University of Cambridge Center for Climate Change Mitigation Research in the UK, and at the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona in Spain. Tiziano is currently the principal investigator of the MIT University of Pisa project entitled Ecological Macroeconomics for an Equitable, Resilient, and Inclusive Transition in the US, which we refer to as Emeritus. This project is a collaboration between Tiziano, Professor Nicholas Ashford at MIT, myself here at Virginia Tech, and also a colleague, Professor Sham Raghunathan at Clemson University, who I believe is also with us today. And it's this collaboration that has also allowed us to craft the study abroad program. Tiziano is a member of the editorial board of the Post-Growth Economics Working Paper Series. He is the vice chair in the local organizing committee for the 14th European Society for Ecological Economics Conference, which will happen in June 2020 of this year. And this conference is also a part of our study abroad program. He's well published in international journals and is the editor of a 2020 Routledge book focusing on water resources and economic processes. So with that, I would like to welcome Tiziano to this seminar today, and I will pass the Zoom mic over to you, Tiziano, for your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Ralph. And hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here and to discuss, show our research, and to invite you to, as Ralph said, to our conference and our summer school. So I will share my screen. Let's see, right. If you can see it. Okay. So, yeah. The title is Theory for Action, Applying System Dynamics to Address Climate Change and Social Inequality. And the motivation and the idea behind this title and our approach stands on the research of scholars Funtowicz and Rawitz that more than 30 years ago introduced us with the post-normal science. And they say that it represents a novel approach for the use of science on issues where facts are uncertain, values in dispute, stakes high, and decisions urgent. So that I think that it resumes, the need to both understand the world around us and to intervene and to change it in order to achieve the sustainable transition, whatever it means. So here. The structure of this presentation is composed by 3 parts. In the first part, I will introduce you with our model, so our approach to model the complexity, and so the construction of the so-called integrated assessment model. And then I will show you briefly our study abroad program at the University of Pisa for students that are interested in coming in Italy, and we will explain you our summer school that is linked to the conference that will be held in Pisa in June this year. So let's go through the model. So the model is grounded on another model that has been published in Nature Sustainability, as we will show you in a few minutes. And the main methodology combines the so-called ecological macroeconomics that is rooted on ecological economics, which philosophy is grounded on the idea that economics is embedded in society, which is embedded in nature. So it recognizes limits to, for instance, economic growth or to, in general, to the economic activities. And so the methodological novelties here introduces is the combination of system dynamics with the so-called environmentally extended input-output. So the main idea is to recover the structure of the economy, to link it to the main ecological variables, for instance, water, land use, or for instance, energy uses and CO2 emissions or whatever. With the social one, so we have a focus also on unemployment and income inequality and so on and so forth. And so to see how the system can evolve over time, and as I show you in a few seconds. And so the topics, as I said, are multiple because this type of approach is quite flexible and allows us to investigate several topics and several issues at the same time. So, for instance, we can focus on inequality and employment. We may also address the impact of COVID in the economy, so how it can recover after this crisis, and other issues. And then this type of model is grounded on real data. So although we run numerical simulations, the model is calibrated on real data. And so the aim is to replicate, to validate the model with known data, and then see with a scenario analysis what might happen in case we apply specific policies, as I show you. So in general, as I said at the beginning, the idea behind this approach is to combine the societal needs, so a good life for all, but within planetary boundaries. So the economy faces two constraints, a social and an environmental one. And to be more specific, some of the research questions that can be investigated are how to simultaneously reach different socioeconomic and environmental goals. So here again, we focus on the need to achieve simultaneously several goals. So we cannot focus on a specific issue, assuming that it has no effect on other side. So we have to include side and direct effects in our research. And so to address this issue, we have to investigate what are the impacts of multiple policies. So of policy packages that include more than one policy. So not only, for instance, simply carbon tax or a working time reduction plan, but what happens if I introduce all of them simultaneously. And then how to overwhelm the long-term detrimental effects of the pandemic crisis. So here again is this type of model allows us to build what-if scenarios. So what could happen if I do something? So the state of the art is so most of the literature focus, as I said before, on specific policies. So it assumes that, for instance, the energetic system is more or less independent from the economic one, or they assume that the economic system follows its own dynamic, and then they try to find an optimal solution and in order, for instance, to get decarbonization. Or on the other side, several studies focus only and directly on social and economic policy. So these studies go in parallel, and so they focus on specific targets. So, for instance, introduction of renewable energy or increasing in public transport on the one hand, or the application of universal basic income or the working time reduction plan. And so they try to assess the impact on specific objectives. So if these measures are able to reach, for instance, decarbonization and then the transition to renewables, or a reduction in employment and inequality. However, the recent literature is showing that we have to take into account also side effects, because, for instance, if I introduce carbon tax, I might have a regressive impact. So, for instance, poorer people are more affected by this policy. Or if I introduce, for instance, a universal basic income, the level of consumption increases, and then it might have a negative impact in terms of decarbonization. So the main idea is to evaluate both type of policies together. So as I said before, the methodology, the aim of the methodology is to build what is called the integrated assessment model, integrated because it integrates the environmental, social, and economic systems, and on the basis of a system dynamics. System dynamic because this methodology is flexible, so it doesn't impose any pre-existing equilibria, so it allows to investigate also out of equilibrium dynamics, and it also allows to take into account a feedback effect. So, as I said before, the economic system, it might impact the environmental one, and it feedback to the economy. So is more flexible than most of the model here usually used. And then we, as I said, this study are grounded on environmental extended input-output. The input-output table allows us to recover the structure of the economy by looking at both intermediate trade, so trade across firms, and final demand. And this is important because, first of all, it is grounded on national accounts. So, I mean, we can look at how actually the economy works, and also it allows us to capture also indirect effect along the whole supply chain. And the extensions that we are implementing is also trying to link the micro, and the macro level. So we try to focus on both sides and to integrate both, as I show you. And okay, I can skip this part and I will take. So the idea is how we can test these, alternative policy packages. First of all, we have to start from a qualitative side. So we have to build a storyline because we try to investigate what could happen in the future. So we have to, we need to build in our mind a possible alternatives, and then based on that, we can define a quantitative model, so the integrated specimen model, in order to define what are the main variables, how they are linked, and what can be the possible dynamics. Then we run simulations, we see the final outcome, and then we can go back to our narratives and look if they can be modified or if they work or not. So the policy packages can be composed by a huge amount of policy, because actually the proposals are multiple. So they can come from more standard green growth economic approach, or more from the Green New Deal, what is in Green New Deal, but also we are able to investigate proposals, more radical proposals that are less discussed, for instance, from the degrowth and post-growth community. And here you have a list of possible proposals. So from universal income to working time reduction, or a change in energy mix, or wealth tax, whatever. So depending on, as I said, on the narrative of what do we want to investigate, we can pick specific policies. And then the type of model is so that by integrating the environmental, social, and economic dimensions, we can implement a so-called multivariate assessment. So we can build many indicators in order to evaluate the impact of each policy on a number of indicators, as I said. So we can check the simultaneous impact on, for instance, inequality, unemployment reduction, economic growth, energy demand, greenhouse gas emissions, and so on and so forth. So the main, the first version of the model, as I said, has been published in Nature Sustainability 2 years ago, and here is I provide you with hopefully a simplified representation of the model. As I said, the effort in representing a complex system is complex as well. So it requires a big effort in integrating all these dimensions, and also an effort in merging data. But as I said, the main idea is to link the input-output structure, that is the intermediate firm trade here in the middle of the figure, And from them, we can calculate, for instance, the greenhouse gas emissions by looking at the sources used to produce energy, and also the impact in case of climate change. But we also link the industrial structure with the household structure. So we can define both the female and the male population and the level of skill depending on the level of education. So, for instance, by distinguishing by high, medium, and low level, and also the working status. So if person is employed, unemployed, pension, or inactive. And another important module is the government one, of course, because since we aim at testing the impact of alternative policies, we have to define a very deep specification for the government model. So with a deep representation of all the revenues, so all type of taxes and expenditures. So, for instance, to see how it works, here is a specific case. So, another representation is a zoom in a sense of the previous macro view. So here in the middle we have the government that, for instance, it implements carbon tax, and it uses the carbon tax revenues to redistribute it to lower income people. So here we can see with these rhombuses how each assumption or each policy might affect the model. So, for instance, this delta here is the way in which government might redistribute revenues. Or, for instance, here this gamma is the pace of technological innovation. So we can see how it affects energy efficiency and how it affects the structure of the economy. So by looking again at the input-output. Or, for instance, this beta here might be used to see how people can adapt, for instance, to a change in prices once the carbon tax is implemented. So if a carbon tax is implemented, the energy price should increase, and then we can test how the people can react in order to reduce the impact mostly to lower income people. And to resume the way in which this model is used, here I compare the two main indicators that we are, two of the many indicators included. So on the left side, the greenhouse gas emission reduction. These plots are based on the first model that was calibrated for France and tested from 2010 and 2050. And so, in order to see if there are synergies or trade-off between these kind of policy packages, we compare the baseline, so the dark, the black line, with three alternative policy packages. So the first one in green is the green growth strategy that includes mostly that is grounded on technological improvements mostly. And PSE is policy for social economy. So it acts on green growth scenario, the introduction of radical social policies, for instance, job guarantee, working time reduction, basic income, and another scenario that is a degrowth. So we assume that people voluntarily shrink their level of consumption. So what we can see is that on the environmental side, the three policies, the three policy packages are able to reduce the level of emissions, but the impact on inequality is quite different, because the green growth paradigm it should lead to an increase in inequality, because it's mostly grounded on technological progress that mostly negatively affect low-income people and low-skilled people, while the introduction of social policies that directly face this problem might be able to pair both the reduction in emissions and an improvement in the reduction of the inequality. However, also this kind of model can be used also to investigate how narrow is the path to a fair energy transition. And so here these are preliminary results from the latest study in which we run numerical simulation with a so-called policy scenario discovery analysis. So we test ex post what kind of policy can be implemented. And what we can see here is that there is a trade-off between the level of inequality and greenhouse gas emissions that is linked to GDP. So on the one hand, an increase in GDP might lead to a reduction in inequality, but it leads to an increase in emissions. So this is only an example to see that once we want to face several goals, most of the time they can be contrasting. So we have to balance the synergies and the trade-off across all the policies. Okay, so these are more or less the take-home messages, and I want to show you how this model works with a practical example. So this is our website. Can you see it? Yes. Okay. And so if you go here, I can show you. I can share with you the link, and you want to simulate a policy package. So let's assume that you are a policymaker and you want to win elections. So you want to see how to get better results. So for instance, you want to introduce basic income, job guarantee, but you are against taxes, so you don't want the carbon tax. You don't want that people decrease their level of consumption. And so you test your, so for instance, you are Trump, and you want to simulate this policy package. Then you compare the baseline with your policy. So for instance, the level of GDP can be higher, and okay, you go to the unemployment rate, okay, it decreases. So you can see directly, immediately, by changing the parameters and the policy used, the impact of your, so for instance, here the level of public deficit increases a lot, so maybe you are not so happy to do this. So, but this is only a way just to test and check immediately how different combination of policies and parameters might affect your model and your simulations. Okay, so just to finish, I hope to be on time. Next step, so the idea is to further develop this model, and is why also we will be happy to have students to get involved in this project in order to further extend this analysis from the spatial side. So for instance, we want to apply this kind of model to the US that is composed by several countries. So we want also to check how the geography also affect the economic development, or how the climate change might hit each part of US in a different way. And also we want to add more ecological variables, so for instance, water, land use, and other stuff. So the idea is to further improve the model by including more and more details. So for instance, here in another study, we start to do this by assessing the impact of in Colombia, the impact of intermediate trade across regions, so within the nation. And one of the results was that most developed regions, so richer departments, are highly dependent on resources of poorer departments. So also at lower scale, there is this kind of a balance, so within the very same country. Okay, so I don't know if you, I complete the presentation of the model. So I don't know if there are some questions or.
Yeah, let's pause for a moment to see if anyone, if I don't see any questions in the chat, but if you have a question, you're welcome to put your hand up, and we'll be happy to take them. Just as a context, one of the, as you can see, this is a very sophisticated, pretty comprehensive model, and we're very interested in taking what's been applied in France and Italy here to the US, and then to start exploring all sorts of policy scenarios to see what could happen in terms of the environmental impact, in terms of jobs and so forth. So it's really the scope of the model is what attracted us to this collaboration. And one of the things that we are trying to do, at least with the study abroad class, is bring students into this process of thinking about how could we bring this model to the US. It will be part of the study abroad class that we'll talk about in a moment. I do see that there's I've had a message here about a question. So if you want to unmute yourself and actually ask your question, please go ahead. I guess what I will do is I see a note here to me. One question, Tiziano, is about why is there quantitative parameters for the sort of human development aspect, and what about the qualitative, maybe quality of life measures that could be considered? So maybe you could speak to that if you can.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it relates to the previous slide. So here, okay, here. So all these studies are useful given a narrative, and also by recognizing that, of course, you have limits when you develop a model, and however, this kind of approach is quite flexible. So once you get, for instance, a relation between a certain quantitative variable with a more qualitative feature, you can also see how the quantitative variable evolves, and then you can infer on the qualitative side. So, for instance, if the level of income distribution is more in favor of poor people, for instance, you might imagine that the level of social welfare should increase. So social welfare is something that is not tangible, but you can refer to it with some variables. Or, for instance, you can test what happens if the government spends more for public health or for public education or for public transport. So you can investigate qualitative issues also by linking it to quantitative ones. So I think that there is no clear-cut division between the two views, and indeed what you are doing in another bigger project is to define storylines more in line with alternative approaches, as I said, so for instance, post-growth or degrowth, and also to see how these storylines can be investigated with a quantitative model. Mostly because, as I said at the beginning, the more idea is also to intervene and to convince policymakers to make some action. So if you have quantitative results together with qualitative narratives, you can be more effective in influence the public opinion.
Thank you. I see my colleague, Dr. Todd Schenk, has his hand up. Todd?
Yeah, I couldn't help myself. No, thank you. This is really interesting. And in fact, I think you coincidentally, just at least in part, answered the question at the very end of what you just said. I was going to ask how this interfaces with policymaking. I mean, I think many of us would like to think policy is influenced by good data, is influenced by, but we know that politicians, policymakers at all levels are also influenced by a set of other factors. And so what is I think you kind of already answered this in part, but I'll still ask it. Maybe you can expand on it a little bit around where this interfaces and how this interfaces with the policymaking competing with other interests and priorities policymakers have.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, indeed, I just refer my personal experience in also the way in which we develop these kind of projects. And most of the time, these include face-to-face discussion with stakeholders, so also coming from the policy arena. And for instance, in one of the projects, we are involved with the representative of the Green Party in Europe, and so they also are asking us does this kind of studies to support their position in the parliament. So the idea is to intervene. I mean, it's one of the story, of course, no? Because also they have to get votes, so there are other issues there. But if you can provide with scientific grounded analysis that can support alternative viewpoints, is a way also to intervene, to convince people. Is also, I think, the way in which, for instance, the IPCC is convincing more and more people that climate change is dangerous and is already there. So is a part of the story, of course.
Thank you for that. And one example, Todd, that I would give, and then we'll maybe move on to the second part of the presentation today. For example, I've been looking at the idea of binary economics, inclusive capitalism for a long time now. It's very theoretical in the way that approach is discussed in the literature. What we're planning to do is, for the first time, model using this sort of architecture that's been developed, a future of binary economics. What could it look like, with the specific intention of bringing these data and empirics to policymakers to start a conversation about these ideas, which has previously never happened because there hasn't been any sort of empirical foundation to have them on beyond the theory, if that makes sense. So that's kind of that's the heart of our collaboration, is to try and use the model to build out some what-if scenarios to start policy discussions in terms of what might be possible and what alternative pathways are out there. So looking at the clock, Tiziano, let's go in and just say a few words about the study abroad program, because I know we have a number of students from Virginia Tech and MIT with us today. So we can give you a quick outline of what we're proposing.
Yeah, there is also a funny part here, so it's important to show with you. And so, as I said at the beginning, with this project, we aim also at involving students in this kind of studies. And so there is an opportunity in Pisa with this study abroad program. So any student that is interested can contact me, and I can share also all this kind of information. And another important part of the story is the joint events that regard the summer school that Professor Ashford, Ralph, and me are organizing in Pisa. That is also linked to that will happen the few days before the beginning of the 14th International Conference of the European Society for Ecological Economics. And that will be an important conference that will gather around 500 scholars from all around the world. And it will be a very good opportunity to get in touch with the most important scholars in this kind of field. And also you can have the opportunity to visit Pisa it might be of interest for you. And the nice thing is that Pisa is a very small city, so everything is very close. So for instance, here, if you see the map, here there is the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and in 15-20 minutes by walking, you can reach the residence of Benedettina, where the conference will be held, and in other 10 minutes by walking, you can be in the site, in the location of the conference. So everything is very close, and as you see, there is the river, and there will be a festival in one of that day that is the Luminara. And here, this monastery is where the summer school will be located, and you will be hosted there for all the time of the conference. So the summer school will begin on the 11th of June, and it will last for 4 days. And actually, it is a very good opportunity because it gathers 3 summer schools, not only one. So ours, that is the one organized by the Virginia Tech, MIT, and UNIPI, so University of Pisa, that is it is titled Sustainable Transitions in Employment, Economic Welfare and Environment. But in the same place and time, there will be also other two summer schools. So the one from the ESEE, so the European Society for Ecological Economics, that is the organizer of the conference, and another one from a group in Pisa, that is the Center for Politics, Ontologies and Ecologies. And so we are planning also plenary sessions in which scholars that are and professors that are teaching in one of the summer school can provide a joint a lecture for every student in every of these summer school. So we are delighted to have in that summer school very high level scholars in ecological economics. So for instance, Kozo Mayumi, that was the last student of Georgescu Reagan, that is the father of ecological economics. Barbara Muraka, that is a philosopher on mostly on the issue of degrowth. Mario Giampietro, that is a colleague of Kozo Mayumi, and that is an expert on integrated assessment models. And then Luigi Pellizzoni, that comes from the University of Pisa and is an environmental sociologist. So as you can see, the very nature of this approach of ecological economics allows us to have people coming from very different fields. So from philosophy to sociology to Giampietro is an engineer, Mayumi is an economist, so you can have multiple views to face these issues. And the conference is it will start from June 14 to the 17th, and the title is I mean, we try to make a provocative title. So if will Achilles catch up with the tortoise? So the main idea is that there is a gap between the policy, the political side, and the knowledge developed by the scientists, and the issue raised by civil society and activists. And so the idea is to fill the gap and to build the bridge between across these spheres. And another interesting part is the hiking summer school. So it's another summer school that will be after at the end of the conference. So probably from the 18th to 23 of June, and it will be on the mountain. So we will hike in the mountain that are very close from Pisa, so more or less is an hour by bus, and they are called Alpi Apuane, that is Apuan Alps, that are our mountains. And another nice thing is that from there you can see the sea, so is in front of the sea. That is a very fascinating panorama. And one of the possible locations are these chalets that will host us. So the idea is to hike one day and another day having crossing in open spaces. And another important stuff, more than having fun, is that these mountains are really exploited because they, as you know, the marble of Carrara is very famous, and they are destroying these kind of mountains. So it's also a way to see and to touch the problems related to economic exploitation of natural resources. Okay, so I can, if you want, I can leave the floor to Ralph to explain better the details related to the application for Virginia Tech students.
Yeah, thank you, Tiziano. So we have an open application right now. It sort of officially closes on February 28th. So if students are interested in joining us this summer, there is a way to apply, both as a Virginia Tech student and as a non-Virginia Tech student. But on this slide, what you see is the basic sort of eligibility requirements. We're looking for rising seniors, graduate students, PhD students to engage. We can take other undergraduate students if they're extremely motivated and have a very good rationale to join us. And once you go through the application process, you can see the various things that will be asked listed at the bottom of the slide here. And if you go to the next slide, if you're a non-Virginia Tech student, there's a process where you can basically create a non-VT study abroad account in our global education office. You can then apply for the study abroad program by the deadline. And then you would also have to basically sort of put forward a non-degree application that happens around March 1, I think, that will launch on March 1. And so essentially you should be able to join us as a non-Virginia Tech student. And what you'll do is, if you're out of state, you would pay sort of out of state tuition. And we do have a colleague from our office here, if anyone has any questions, Rachel Fitzgerald, who can answer very specific questions about how these various processes might work. We do have, there's a couple of slides just showing the budget here. Typically what happens is there's a program fee, which covers things like the conference fees, accommodation costs, some transportation, some food, that sort of thing. And then what we list here is other out-of-pocket expenses, which you may pay, for example, such as your airfare. Some students have frequent flyer miles they can use, so that may be reduced. And you may be flying from different parts of the US. So there's just an estimate here, for example, of what that might cost you out of pocket. You also have tuition costs, which obviously vary as to whether you're an undergraduate student, which is what this slide is showing, whether you're in-state versus out of state. And then, so if you're looking at a total estimate of the costs, you can see them at the bottom here, just over 6,000 for in-state undergraduate, just over 8,000 for out-of-state undergraduate. And if you click on the next slide, Tiziano, you'll see those costs increase a little bit for graduate students, principally because of tuition costs are different across undergraduates to graduates. All the rest in terms of program fee are the same. So what hopefully the takeaway, I guess, from today's session is really this study abroad program has come about from a research collaboration, which was based upon the model and work that we were doing previously. Tiziano and his colleagues are leading the development of the international conference. A few of us are serving as external advisors on that in terms of reviewing papers, that sort of thing. So we decided that let's try and integrate everything in a study abroad program. So I think this is quite a unique opportunity. What we will do is look at this model as part of that study abroad program, but we'll also do many other things in the program. It won't just be a model. I think the model would be one of our maybe 10, 15 sort of target conversation sessions throughout the summer school. And in the conference, students will basically have the freedom to pick their own schedule. So there's 500 or so experts coming in and giving presentations and joining debates and panel discussions. So this will be a great opportunity for students to pursue and get deeper knowledge about what they're very interested in. And as part of the summer school, there will be some kind of reporting out requirement that we'll ask everybody to do in terms of what they did, what they attended, who they met. It's a professional network building opportunity as well. So I'm going to pause it here. We do have time left for any questions that anybody has at this point about the study abroad school, summer's program, or Tiziano's research. And please use the chat or just open up your mic and speak up.
Hi, my name is Jia Ha. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, I'm a graduate student from Virginia Tech, and this is kind of a general question, but I'm interested, Tiziano, as somebody who's like just starting grad school and kind of getting into things and learning about so much, what's something that really inspired you to start going into the path that you are in now? Was it like a book that you read or someone that you met, or like something that you recommend for people who are new to look into?
Yeah, no, thanks. In general, related also to this to our presentation. The main idea is to the participation to the summer school and to the conference will also provide you with a solid background in this kind of studies. So also with other approaches, not necessarily ours, but it can be an opportunity to be in touch with the main representative of the people who are writing the book on which you are studying on. So it could be a very nice opportunity also to meet directly these people and other scholars, and so you can have a better both a better understanding, and you can discover something that usually, at least in Italy, is not taught. So it's not taught. So it can be as Raf said, a unique, almost unique opportunity, because, for instance, I studied this stuff from my own. I met some people, but I never studied it during my course in university. So it can be, a way to start also your research and to define your research for the future by having a good ground and solid ground.
Maybe just following up on that, Tiziano, maybe you could say just a little bit about your pathway, your story. So you've graduated, I think you got your PhD in 2015.
Yeah.
Prior to that, what sort of put you on that trajectory to graduate school and now sort of academics?
Okay. Yeah. I got my graduation in economics, but to be honest, I was not so happy about the mainstream approach, and those unsatisfied. And then I started the PhD in Lucca, that is a city here in Italy, close to Pisa, and there I discovered other approaches. So, for instance, the approach to the network theory, the complexity issues, and I met a guy whose research was based on ecological economics. So I discovered this issue, and from there I started to do my studies. At the beginning, my focus was on water resources, so the limits on water resources to economic growth. And then I moved to the Polytechnic of Turin, and I work with hydrological engineers. So as I said, by definition is a multidisciplinary type of study. So I collaborated with them for 2 years, and then I moved back to Pisa, where I live. I live very close from Pisa, and then here we set up a team with there is a philosopher also here with us. So and we start to develop this kind of model, and the aim is to boost and to push this kind of these studies, and to having also classes during the university, also to allow students to have multiple visions on how to study and to face economic problems.
Great, thank you. Are there any final questions for Tiziano? Okay, well, I don't hear any. I think at this point we will wrap things up, and let me again thank Tiziano for making the time to join us today. And we've had a lot of fun over the past 6 months or so developing the scope of this study abroad program. So we're really looking forward to working with all the students that apply. And if you're on this and you know of students that may find this interesting, please share the link to this program with them. Hopefully this will now make more sense. The first time we put this out, people were asking about what's this international conference got to do with this summer school, got to do with the out. So it's all connected. Hopefully that connection is clearer now. And what we are planning to do is once we have the sort of student group that will form for the program, start having sessions and meetings later this semester. So we actually might start working on some of the research that you heard about today. So With that, I will draw this to a close and wish everyone a great evening if you're in Europe, and the rest of the day if you're in the US.